We may as well make a start. I'd like to say welcome to Todd, talking to us from Hurstville in Sydney. Todd, have you spoken to this group before?
I have been to Melbourne years ago, but I was not a speaker. I was a visitor.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not in my time.
Not in your time. Well, it's lovely to have you with us. It's nice for you to be diluting my voice with somebody else. So I look forward to hearing what you've got to tell us. We are being recorded. I think everybody will have been notified of that. And yeah, let's enjoy the evening with Todd, and I'll let you take it away, mate.
All right, thanks. I find that it's often useful in occasions such as this, where we're new to each other, to just say a little bit about myself, introduce me. So you've got my name. I grew up outside of Philadelphia in the Bernathen area. I came to the church through my dad, actually. He found the church as a young man. He was searching for answers, and through providence, came across the writings. The big aha for him was Apocalypse Revealed. He really wanted to know what the book of Revelation was about, and that was kind of the thing for him. So he moved us. He was an Air Force pilot at the time, and he moved our family to Bernathen to be part of the new church community there. And so I grew up around all this stuff. Went through all the schools there, and eventually decided I'd had enough new church stuff and moved away. Very deliberately, saying, all right, this is all fine and good. You guys have a good time. I'm gonna go do something else. And I sold race car parts basically for about 10 years. And during the last few years of that, I had kind of had a spiritual awakening. It's a whole other story of its own, which I won't get into here tonight. But suffice to say, the result was that I found the church for myself. All the stuff that I've been taught, it's not that I didn't, agree with it. It's just that, wow, it suddenly, what really clicked for me, I guess, was that the story of the Old Testament was a story about me and my life. And I saw that, wow, yeah, I'm a slave, wow, these Egyptians, man, this is just like me. I do these same things as these Israelites. I chase golden calves and do all these stupid things. And boy, yeah, there's a better life promised if I just actually do what's asked of me here. So essentially what happens is I fall in love with the teachings, seeing how it's good for life change and leads to a better place, which had me this crazy idea, well, maybe I should become a pastor, maybe I should do this for a living. The GC at the time had this offer where, hey, if you come train with us as a second career person, we'll waive your tuition fees. So said to the wife, hey, I'm going to be a minister. And she says, what, you're not nice enough to be a minister. Yeah, you can't do that. No. Being a pastor is for nice people. So to the surprise of all, I went ahead and did that. And that's another story of its own too. But hey, that gives you a brief outline of how I got here. Well, how I got into ministry, not how I got here, but that's another story. So anyway, I'm willing to entertain questions. I hope you find tonight that I like to be easygoing. I like to have a good time. If you have something funny to say, I'll give you 10 points. That's always allowed. I don't mind interruptions or whatever, just so long as we have a good time. And this is a topic I'd like to share and like to talk about. So yeah, yeah. All right. With that in mind, I will say, usually in the about me section that I forgot to say is I have a wife. I've been married to her for 23 years now. We have a son who's 15, and we have a long-term house guest, a 19-year-old girl who's been staying with us. So our house is full with them and a dog. And yeah, there we go. That wraps up the personal stuff.
Where do you live?
Sorry?
Where do you live?
Oh, I live next to the church here in Hurstville in Sydney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did
So
you come from America, did you?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, the Hurstville pastor here was supposed to be here from 2011, I think is when he no, 2010, I think he moved here. And then he had a heart attack and died. And so then they needed somebody else. And so they imported some American guy. And you know what? I was young when I got here. I was 36, 37, something like that. I had a full head of hair.
Oh,
You know, I had a little 5-year-old son. No gray hairs, I'm sure. Look at what Australia's done to me.
are you happy here in Australia?
Yeah, we had a great time. We actually got our citizenship just a few months ago. So we're happy overall with Australia. It's been a great experience. Absolutely. Big adventure.
You can claim compensation for the grey hair and everything.
I like the way you're thinking. So let me pull up
Tell us
my.
about your spiritual conversion in the nutshell.
Sorry.
Tell us about your spiritual conversion. Was it something like on the road to Damascus?
I mean, yeah, no. I mean, I think the big catalyst, I'd say, was probably the passing of my mother. So she died in 2005. And it just kind of had this, I had a good relationship with my mom. We got along well. And I very much missed her. And there was also this aspect to it, though, that in my mind, she thought I was a good person. In my mind, I knew all the thoughts and stuff that were going on in my head that said, "Meh, you're not the person that your mommy thinks you are." Yeah, and just like, well, okay, well, why not? And I knew some stuff I needed to work on, and that was kind of the catalyst to try to, you know what, maybe this is the time in life where you need to start actually paying more attention to these things. But there was just some things I was involved in that I was having a hard time letting go of. And I found that by reading the word every day, that was kind of my first step on the path. Was all right, just read a chapter a day every day. And I just found that really did a lot for reducing my anxiety, and kind of repetitive addictive type behaviors. So
when you read the word, was it the Bible or Swedenborg?
It was the Bible. It started at Genesis chapter 1. And just started working my way through. And what that led to, I tried to read the writings. I found that I got lost and I didn't understand what I was reading, and it was not making any sense to me. Because I started at Arcana 1 to go with my Genesis 1. And what ended up happening was my father-in-law, who was a long-time member at the new church in Toronto, where my wife was from, he gave me a copy of the Bible study notes written by Anita Dole. And that's what saved the day for me. Was I was like, that's how I kind of realized, oh wait, these stories have actually personal meaning. Look at this. This is, yeah, okay, I can see myself doing that. So that's really what was propelling me further down the path. And so this is kind of his fault as much as anybody's. Like I say, I mean, it was great. I mean, I think they were as stunned as my wife was that I was doing this. I think everybody was pretty shocked, and I think some people still are. I have a hard time seeing it every now and again, seeing a Rev next to my name. It's just like,
because you don't look like a minister. You haven't got
exactly. I don't feel like a minister either.
Right.
Don't even behave like one.
No, absolutely not. I don't think I tick any of those boxes, but that's been happening for the past. I was ordained 2011, so it's been 11 years now. I'm 47. So
you're 47, yeah. Okay, you look all right. 47, you look good.
I feel all right, except for some aching knees and elbows. I do all right.
It gets worse.
Yeah, so I've been told.
Yeah, it doesn't get better.
Oh, well, let's get this show on the road, shall we?
Yeah.
don't want to miss the whole point of why I'm here. Of course, which means David would get to use me for another class if I did that. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, yeah, come on back.
Yeah, you can come back.
Yeah. Well, so what I'm going to share with you, let's see, I'm going to share this screen. Share. Okay.
Cool.
There we go. And
What happened? We
You-
lost
can you see anything?
Yeah, yeah. I
All
can.
right.
creating creating our own reality.
Yeah. So here's the deal here. You'll see this is part 2. So this is some work I've been doing over the 10 years or so. A paper I wrote was called The Creation Progression, How We Create Our Own Reality. And as you no doubt noticed, this is part 2. And we didn't do part 1 because, hey, I was only invited for one class at the time. And I thought this is actually the more interesting part of the presentation. So we'll give a quick hit at part 1, but you don't really need it for part 2. But here's the quote I'm starting with here. Every love has a purpose. If you understand all this in the right way, you'll be able to see the universe as a coherent work from beginning to end, a work holding purposes, means, and results in indissoluble connection. Wow, how about that? What I like about this quote is we're setting the stage of trying to get a big picture. You know, that's what I'm shooting for here, a big picture kind of idea, something where, we see how the universe makes sense, and hopefully when you finish this session tonight, you'll be able to understand people a little bit better than you did before you started, So part 1 was a look at the system that we're in, kind of what's the world that we're in, who's in charge of it, the Lord's in charge. How does he govern? Well, divine providence. And what are the rules? Okay, we have all those lists of divine providence rules that we're not going to get into, but there is a system. There is some organization to this. And part 2 is, well, how do we operate? If we have a system that we're in, how do we operate within the system? And the big question is that we're addressing tonight is, well, why do you do the things that you do? I got this picture of the ice cream cone here, Kermit and Piggy eating their ice cream. Why did you do that? Why did you get that ice cream cone? Why did you go to church? Why did you do this? What's the driver behind the things that we do? And so, well, the short answer is, well, we operate like the Lord. We operate from our loves. So, maybe you can't see that. Your faces are all covering it up on my screen, but I'm going to minimize you. There we go. Leave that in case David's recording this. So yeah, we operate from our loves. Okay, so that's kind of a starting point. Let's see. So here's the next quote I want to show you to kind of build on this a little bit. It says, "For nothing is increased and multiplied in man or people unless there be some affection, for it is the delight of the affection that causes it not only to take root, but also to increase. And everything depends upon the influence of the affection. What a person loves, he freely learns, retains, and cherishes, thus all things that favor any affection. Those which do not favor, the man cares nothing for, regards as nothing, and even rejects. But such as the affection is, such is the multiplication." So, this isn't exactly rocket science here, right? If you love something more, you do more of it, right? As such as the affection is, such is the multiplication. My kid loves to play video games. So guess what he does? He plays more video games. My kid doesn't really like taking the dog for a walk, but he doesn't do much of that. This isn't really hard to understand. We've experienced this regularly. However, what we're seeing here is that if we understand this, like that opening quote from TCR, if we understand everything in the right way, we can start to see that this is the path to becoming who we are, because we have an affection for something. So we think about it and then we do it. Right? So what the writings talk about is they actually put this, they give us this connection here, that affection leads to thought, which leads to action. I'm not making this up. And I think it's really better described as a circle. You love something, so you think about it, so you do it. Oh, that was fun. Let's do that again. Let's love it some more. Let's think about it some more. Let's do it again. Okay, okay. We run this circle. And this is kind of how we create our reality, by running these cycles over and over and over again. So what I want to do next is take a look at each one of these things in a little more detail. What are loves? Well, the writings say love is like a fountain, and an affection is like a stream from the fountain. We're told that love creates, right? So we have this picture of the Lord there. You see where, okay, he's emanating. He's like the fountain, and the affections are all these lights beams that come out of it. And what does the Lord do? Well, he creates, right? He is a creator. So if you got that, well, then where do affections come from? Well, affections come from, well, let's ask, I'll stop the share here for a second. Any takers on hazarding a guess and risk of being wrong and personal embarrassment? If you don't have the answer that I have behind the screen here as to where do affections come from, you'd have to unmute yourself.
Probably either from heaven or hell, or both.
Right. I support that answer. Yeah, that's a good one. It's not just the only answer, but yes, he's got a good one. Anybody else?
And then heredity.
No.
Your father liked racing car football, you might like football. Something like that. Like
Yep.
your father had a funny nose, you got a funny nose. That sort of thing.
I agree.
We inherit their physical characteristics. We can also inherit their affections. Like for sport or for swimming or anything.
Yep. We're
Self is a good reference for what I love. I tend to look for things that are like me, people that are like me, things, the way that I look at things, resonating things. Not always good, but that's what I do.
Yep.
What about lack? If I lack something, that creates a love. Like if I'm hungry, I love food.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. I mean, I guess the list that I have is from the writings, and dang it, I've mucked it there. This is my PowerPoint. So heaven, which I didn't list hell on there, but it's true. The writings say they come from heaven and they come from hell. Delights or pleasures, and I guess that's kind of what Joe you were going for there in the opposite sense. If you have something, you enjoy it, and therefore you have an affection for it. And I guess if you don't have something similar kind of mechanism, so you got to figure out, well, where do those come from? We'll get that in a minute. Heredity, that was mentioned, learned behaviors, life, spouse. Can you believe it? Your spouse influences you? Hard to believe. I know. It's true. It's true. I don't think my wife's ever changed anything in me. Yeah, right. So yeah, you have all that. And the question I kind of come to at the end is, would you do blank without pleasure? Think of something that you do. Would you do it without pleasure? And, here's a part where we have to kind of get a little bit honest with ourselves, because we say, we do nice things because it's pleasurable. It's pleasurable to eat the ice cream. It's pleasurable to help somebody else. It's pleasurable to do things. But you know what? There's a problem, is that it's also fun to be a jerk sometimes. And we have to be honest with ourselves that sometimes we enjoy being a jerk, and that can be belittling somebody. It can be all sorts of different things that we can do that aren't not kind, and the writings are very clear that we do evil because we enjoy it. It's unpleasant to admit it, but you know what? It's true. And so this is where I want to take you back to that quote we had a minute ago. It said, "For nothing is increased and multiplied in a man unless there be some affection, for it is the delight of the affection." The delight of the affection that causes it not only to take root to increase and blah, blah, blah. So I think our little creation circle needs to be modified. And it should look like this, because it really starts with enjoying something. You enjoy something, you take pleasure in it. Therefore, you love it. You think about it. You do it. And that doing it gives you what? Pleasure. So you love it and think about it and do it. And around and around and around you go.
So, Todd, you're saying, why do we do things? But there are many reasons why we do things that don't involve pleasure necessarily. Like, say, we do it out of fear, or we do it out of mechanicality because we've been trained to do it, or out of reflexes. You're really asking, why would we choose to do something, right?
I suppose you could phrase it that way. Yeah. I mean, I can see that. It's still, even like, well, I guess in a fear-based situation, you're still, whatever you choose is giving you more pleasure than the alternative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're choosing a more pleasurable course. Now, we'll get into some of the detail of that in a minute, but I think it isn't always an immediate pleasure, I guess is what I'm going for, but there's always a pleasure that we're going after. And sometimes, yes, it's very short term. You want ice cream because it tastes really good right now, thanks. That kind of thing. But our life, who we are is run by our loves. And those loves and pleasures are so tied together. And like I say, not all those pleasures are from good things. There's a quote in the writings. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the number. Anyway, basically the point is that it was saying how incredibly overwhelming the pleasure is of ruling over other people. Absolutely beyond comprehension is what it was going for. Is just that so you think of these politicians and crazy people who want to rule the world, right? These people are sucked up in this pleasure. There is it's an evil love, but there is a massive amount of pleasure out of ruling over others. And so that causes them to love that goal. And so they think about how they're going to plot to take over the world, and they're going to do their little plans into action and whatnot. And maybe they don't want to, maybe they can't take over the whole world, but I'll tell you what, I have, one of the jobs I've done in Australia as a little side gig is I have spent some time helping out in Coles and Woolies at times. I'll pop out of this. And I got involved with this little company, and what they do is they go in there and they rearrange the shelving. Like, new products come out, so they got to, rearrange the shelves in the stores. And so a few times a year, I get called in to help out with a project. And some of the people who run their different sections of the store, this is their world. and they have a power trip going on because I run this section of the store. These 4 aisles, they are mine, and they have pleasure in ruling over it. And they, that's like, I got to go in there and kiss the ring to do stuff, even though I'm trying to help them. I don't want to make a big deal of it because it's not everybody like this, of course, but there are people like that. That power, that pleasure of ruling over others is very real. So anyway, with that little aside, I guess, I'll pop back over to the slides. So the writings talk about the role of affections. And it says, well, they are there as a way for the Lord to reach us. So if we love something, he can kind of guide us gently that way. He can, if you're being guided by a positive affection, you can be quietly led, and that keeps us in freedom. And guess what else? Less rebellion. Children of Israel were rebelling because they were not being led by their affections all the time. But the key piece that I'm focusing on here tonight really is this idea of chain of command. Your loves produce your thoughts and not the other way around. This is the big piece I hope you'll walk away with tonight, is the writings are very clear. Loves produce thoughts, not the other way around. And this is going to be a big deal in a minute. So we'll hang that one on your side there and hold on to it. So if loves produce thoughts and not the other way around, well, how do you change? How do you change your thoughts? Or how do you change your loves? Sorry, how do you change your loves? How do you make yourself say, I don't want ice cream anymore? That's hard to do, right? Never tried to convince yourself of loving something you don't, or other way around? Like I've tried for years to learn to love broccoli. I'll tell you what, ain't happening. Ain't happening.
Someone to invent broccoli ice cream.
That's right, bro. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's going to do it. But what I think about is, well, how does an addict change? I don't necessarily mean, it can be, of course, drugs, alcohol, stuff like that. But there are all sorts of things we can get addicted to, right? You can get addicted to gambling. You can get addicted to the sex and the porn. You can get addicted to working out. I mean, there's all, all sorts of things. Food addictions, of course, there's plenty of different things that you can enjoy doing. But why does somebody change? Why does somebody change? Well, what the writings tell us is a few different things. Eventually, evil pleasures eventually run dry. They run stale. I was doing this study on the back of conjugal love, where it has all the nasty loves. And one of the things it was talking about was they go through this section on adultery, first degree adultery, second degree adultery, all these different things. And then it gets to these different lusts, the lust for rape, the lust for defloweration. There's these 4 different ones. And what Swedenborg writes is that these 4 lusts all come as a result of adultery becoming stale. Somebody's just so invested in adultery, they've done it so much. Stealing somebody's wife, not doing it anymore. I gotta do something else. So there's this. How do we change? Well, we could, instead of getting into a worse evil, we could do the opposite of that and actually change direction. Say, well, this isn't fun anymore. I'm going to make a change because I can see that this isn't going anywhere good. You can get to rock bottom, right? The drunk person can hit rock bottom, saying, you know, I've lost my wife, my family, my job, I've lost all these things. Or a person could have foresight. A person could say, start going to the pokies. They lost, you know, $500 or $1,000 in a couple of weekends, and they thought, you know what, this isn't going anywhere. I see where this behavior is taking me, and they haven't lost anything of, you know, massive value, but you know, something. But they had the foresight. So you can change your loves because, you know what, I'm going to stay away from this gambling thing. I'm going to teach myself that this is bad. The writings call this principles subdue affections. It doesn't change them, but it subdues them long enough to allow you to change. So it can be changed. The writings say it's very clear that it's the Lord who changes them, but we have to kind of put in some work. So the next bit here is thought, going through our little cycle here. You know, what about thought? What do we know about that? Well, writings tell us that, you know, well, you love something, so you think about it, the thoughts according to the affection. In the spiritual world, thought brings presence, but there's something to it in the natural world as well. You know, you might gauge by these pictures that I like fast cars. I would really like to have a red Mustang GT. Now, mine would be a convertible with a tan top, manual transmission, probably a saline package as well. Well, you probably don't know what that is, but that's okay. But I'm giving you the idea. I know what I want. Somehow, even though I've thought about this car for years, it has not brought it into my presence. It's failed to manifest it. But the thing is, I could probably if I wanted to, if I really wanted to. And our thoughts help us become who we are. We love something. So let's say you want to be a teacher or a pastor or whatever it is you want to be. You know, you think about it, and so you have to set yourself on that path to do it. So you get, you know, thinking is required. But in Scripture, the writings say that thought is represented by speech. You know, you're familiar with this. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's about what God is thinking, technically. Moses says to the Israelites to prepare for battle against the Midianites. So his speech, it's representative of our internal thought. We have to do this battle against the Midianites. And then they, of course, they do that. Joshua orders them to go march around Jericho. They do it. And so the idea here, again, is we're making the point, you know, it's think, then do. So, right, it goes with loves, thoughts, and then action, right? We're getting at this cycle put together here. You know, lessons, you know, what are some of the takeaways on this? Thoughts originate from the Lord. This is where they start at. The Lord communicates to us by way of angels. No one can think from themselves, but from others. And these again, from others and so on. So like, this is a big one, right? This is a big one. We don't have independent thought, right? We are all receiving thoughts from outside of ourselves. And this idea, you know, is illustrated in the scripture through the Jacob's ladder story, the angels going up and down. It's this communication, this chain link from, you know, earth to God. So essentially we think from our spirit. And so you got to ask the question to yourself, you know, well, hey, with whom does your spirit reside, right? Who are your thoughts connecting you to? It's it's, you know, you really got to stop and think about that and ask yourself, all right, these thoughts good? You know, you don't have to take responsibility for the thoughts. The thoughts aren't your fault, but you got to be able to assess, okay, well, where's this coming from a good place or a bad place? Let's see, pick up the pace here a little bit. So we're establishing here that thoughts are subordinate to our affection, right? So the love comes first. The thoughts are affected by what you love. So the example here I'm going to talk about is the scribes and the Pharisees. It's from Luke chapter 6. The short version of this is that Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath. The scribes and the Pharisees did not like this. You know, what are you doing healing somebody on the Sabbath? You can't work on the Sabbath. This is crazy. What are you doing? You're going against the law. So Jesus, of course, sets them straight and says, no, you guys don't understand this, right? You guys are completely wrong. And he gives them a very reasonable answer as to why he was right and it was okay to heal this man on the Sabbath by the law. So, of course, the scribes and the Pharisees all, of course, nod their heads and say, yeah, you nailed it, Jesus. Thank you for correcting us and reforming our way of thinking. No. The truth did not change their thinking. Even though the truth was presented to them, they still did not change. And this is an example given to us in the writing saying, hey, look, the thinking is controlled by the loves. And the scribes and the Pharisees had this greater love of ruling and of power over others. And that's why their position on Jesus's activities did not change. And so this happens to us on many levels. We have blind spots because we love certain things. This is kind of the Adam and Eve story, right? Eve corrupts the thought of Adam. The serpent corrupts the thought of Eve, right? It's this corruption that happens because, well, somewhere along the way, they developed this love that was not healthy. It was not a good one. So, yeah, this is a big deal, and I think culturally we're wise if we see this. This is where I'm building the big takeaway for this tonight is seeing for yourself that not only are your thoughts manipulated and controlled by your loves and are subordinate to your loves, but that's what everybody else is too. I mean, how many times have you gotten into a debate or argument with somebody, you've given them great logic, and they don't change their position? You say, well, Blake, I presented my case so clearly, and yet they don't change. They don't change their mind. Drives me nuts. Drives me absolutely nuts. I used to do, so as I think I said, I did selling of stuff for years. And I could go to, Ford Motor Company, one of my customers, and I would go to them and say, well, look, guys, this is the problem you guys are having. This is the product I have to solve your problem. Let's make a deal. A very logical thing is all about money, right? If I could provide the product for the right price, we had a deal. But you get into some of these other arguments with normal people, you'll find that sometimes you can change their minds and sometimes you can't. And when you can't change their mind, it's often more about them and how much they love the underlying topic versus anything about your presentation. I've had conversations with people about all sorts of topics. And there's this one guy who's a hardcore environmentalist. And I had fun one day suggesting to him that one of his theories was wrong, that I had heard a different theory. And I was presenting him this theory that I thought was pretty reasonable. I'm no expert in this stuff, but he got really upset and mad at me for showing this other theory I'd found in the newspaper that I thought was legitimate. And I realized, you know what? It's because he loves this stuff so much that he just he's not interested in hearing a different point of view. Fine. So we have to remember this stuff when dealing with other people, as well as seeing the blind spots in ourselves and going, oh, gee, well, what is it that I'm missing? What am I not hearing because I love something so much?
So the flat earth adherents would be typical of that.
He's right. That's right. They love their theory so much. Exactly.
Yeah, even a photograph won't convince them.
That's right. There's many of those all around the globe.
Look, you know what? I had a great example once where this friend of mine she was looking for a new car, and I was willing to help her find one. And, I know a bit about this stuff. And I had presented a few different options. And then it came back to me that no, they were buying a Ford because her husband says, we buy Fords. They're Ford people. It didn't matter that the Toyota or whatever else was a better car. We buy Fords. That was his love. And I didn't realize how people could be about some of things like that, but it's real. That was a deep love.
So they didn't end up buying a Mustang under your.
No,
under your
they did not. Funny you say that.
recommendation.
I had tried to get my father-in-law to buy a Mustang for years, and he never did. He kept buying boring old Toyotas. And I was like, come on, you're retired, have fun. No.
Yeah.
But I'll share with you next slide here is a memorable relation. I've kind of, I've shortened it a bit to give you the idea. It shows this basic dynamic. Swedenborg gives us many real examples of this dynamic in his recorded interactions with other people in the spiritual world. In one such occurrence, Swedenborg is debating just who or what created the universe. Swedenborg's opponents, a few philosophers, stated that the universe was created by nature. While they disagreed as to how nature created itself, they all held a thought process that led them to the conclusion that it had done just that. They were immersed in that line of thinking which led them astray. It closed the inner realms of their minds so tightly that no light from God or his heaven can flow in and enlighten them. They have extinguished that light. As the two sides debated, a priest who believed that God created the universe told the philosophers that we can see past the illusion of creation by nature if we can remove our loves that belong to the physical world. At that point, the Lord instantly removed the loves like that from the philosophers, and they realized the error of their ways, crying that we have been insane. Indeed, they had. But this new state was not their own state, and after a few minutes, it became tiresome and unwelcome to them, and they returned to their former loves. This did not end well for the philosophers. They found pleasure in doing evil things and had done so much evil to others that they were ultimately imprisoned and became demons. So, how fun is that? This does tell us that the change of affection isn't necessarily for the better, right? Not necessarily for the better. The question becomes, how deeply have we appropriated and made some love part of ourselves? Some loves, oh, well, hey, I know I like chocolate chip ice cream, but you could convince me to like mint chocolate chip better, right? Or, I love piano at church, but maybe you could convince me to have a guitar in the service or something. Some things we love, but maybe, okay, I'm willing to negotiate on it. And you see in scripture that to sojourn, so when they take these journeys, it's about being instructed. So we're getting some changes in our thoughts through that instruction. So now we'll head down the home stretch here, try to wrap some of this up. We got our third part here is action, right? So we've had love, we've had thought, we have action. And action, well, that's how reality is created, right? By doing stuff. The writings talk about it as being the uniting of the will and the understanding. The actions make our identity, right? I am a pastor, right? That makes my identity. I sell race car parts, that's my identity. That's what. So we've got to make sure that the actions actually manifest the identity that we want and the person that we want to be. It's actually kind of scarily important how actions are, because divine providence says that the actions become a permanent part of us and that they break the ice, so to speak, on certain behaviors. there's this, and I got to find this passage at some point, but there's this image that he's given us where, like, the evil spirits and whatnot that we interact with in our life, we call them up out of hell, and they operate into our life through this world of spirits. But there are angels guarding these doors to hell. So, like, evils that you've never committed, the doors to those hells are shut pretty darn tight. But, when Joe goes out tomorrow night and gets on a drunken binge and does some new evils that he's never done before, well, he's opened up the door to that hell. And guess what? Now that door swings a little bit more freely, and it would be easier to repeat that evil the second time. I think we've all had that experience, right? So the actions are a big deal, even when we do it just once, because it becomes much easier to do it the second time, the third time, and the fourth time. And then all of a sudden it's part of our life. And that's no bueno, no bueno. So yeah, got to be careful on what habits you form. The power of action is that it's the love, wisdom, and use all in alignment. The writings, Swedenborg talks about how in the writings, the Old and the New Testament are the ultimates, right? They're the spiritual ultimates. It's everything is contained in that literal sense. And so it contains everything. And likewise, our actions contain the love, they contain our thoughts, they contain the pleasure. It's everything there. And you can see here in this quote from Conjugal Love that love and wisdom only exist ideally because they are solely in the mind's affection and thought. But in use, so in action, they actually exist. They exist really because they exist at the same time in the body's action and deed. So it's real. It finally becomes real when you do it. You can think about it, and it's not real. You can, the men who are watching, listening to this, you can go to the beach and see a pretty girl and think thoughts, but it's not real. You didn't do anything. You just thought, okay, well, she walks by. But there's plenty of things you can think about, and it's not real. But once you actually do it, man, there's something real changes. And so you have to kind of keep in mind that what comes in is according to what you put out. So if you do actions that are not good, you're going to get thoughts that are not good. It's going to feed this negative loop. And we have to think of ourselves, kind of like as a TV show. We got to stop taking not responsibility. We got to stop taking credit and blame for the thoughts that come into our minds. In a TV show terms, they create a new TV show, right? Neighbors, right? And so somebody says, oh, we want to advertise on that show. So sponsorship ensues, and then there's a joining between the sponsors, between the program creators and the watchers. It's this, kind of family thing. And so what we put out, the TV show, whatever our actions, it's going to create more things drawing in. I get more into all that side of things in part 3 of the presentation, which we're not going into tonight. But the point is, habits are hard to break. Giving up something you love can be the equivalent of changing your identity, right? That's difficult to do. I mean, it was difficult for me to change my identity from a guy who sells race car parts to a guy who's supposed to be nice. That was, oh boy. Yeah. Now, a little aside here, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I put this in there in my original draft of this presentation because I understood that passage, that phrase to mean, I don't want the Lord to be my shepherd because he leads me to good waters. He does good things, and I don't want good things. I have since been informed that is not how you should interpret that passage. It's, I shall not be of want. I shall not be wanting because the Lord gives me all those sorts of things. So that's, if you're ever wondering why that's there, that's how it is, because I think it reads a little bit different in my first, I thought it read differently. I don't want him to be my shepherd. And I think the reason it is because the reality is we don't. By birth, the writings tell us we have a craving for hell. We have to acquire the taste for good. I call good spiritual beer because I don't really like beer. And I've been told by plenty of people, it's an acquired taste. Well, so is goodness. By birth, we don't want it. But the writings tell us that the actions precede and then the desire follows. And so this picture here is from the story where the Israelites are in the desert. The waters are bitter. And so Moses gets a piece of wood and puts it in there to make the water less bitter. And it's a picture that the actions, our actions, make being good palatable. We go, all right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to help Joe work on his house. I'm going to help him do some plumbing work or whatever because I know how to do this stuff. I don't really like Joe, but I'm going to do it. And then, you know what? Something comes over us and we think, this isn't so bad. Yeah, maybe Joe's not as big of a jerk as I thought. Whatever, the actions start to make being nice to Joe a little more palatable. That's that story. And so we have to be careful though, because that can cut both ways. And the writings tell us that our desires are like fires, and that once they get released, they just keep on burning. And that's the picture of the person who's the alcoholic, the person who's the gambling addict, right? They just, I think, what's the phrase with alcohol? One is one too many, one more is never enough, I think is how it goes. And that's right. And that's how you can have a good feel for whether you're into something bad or not. If you just can't stop it, if more is not enough, it's probably a sign you're not into something good. When its sphere just keeps expanding, it's when the love is now ruling the person. So the final slide I have here is just a summary. I just hopped right past it. The last slide here is just a summary of what we had here, which is this pleasure gives to love, gives to thought, gives to action. And if you hold this all in the right way, you understand the world better. And I think that's what we're going for, is to understand that people are motivated by their loves. And when they disagree with you, when they, don't do what you want them to do, despite the logic of your thinking, it shows that there's an underlying love that's ruling over this. Try to convince a Trump supporter that Trump's an idiot, and conversely convince, do the opposite, convince a Biden supporter that he's an idiot. It's hard to do because there's an underlying love that's in place, and that's what creates the thoughts and so forth.
It's not just love, it's also conditioned stupidity. Yeah.
Well, there might be some of that. Somebody might not be very good at their thinking. That's true.
I think it's a lot easier these days to convince a Biden supporter that Biden is an idiot.
Well, that might be true. Biden's not done well for himself lately.
But that's only because he's living proof of the fact.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So that's the talk I had for tonight. I don't know about you guys, but like, as I said in the intro, I was raised in all the new church schools and all this stuff, and I had never come across this basic idea. It was when I was doing my studies of the writings as an adult, I came across this. I'm like, wow, this makes sense. This explains a lot to me about how I deal with others and why I can convince some people of things and not of others. And it really clicked for me, and it clicked for my own thinking, going, oh, well, gee, no wonder I think and do these things, because I can see that there's this love that's behind it and pushing it. So I don't know. I felt it was a useful thing to my life. You can tell me sometime later if it was useful for you.
I thought it was very useful, and thank you for that. I thought it was really good. Thanks for that. I thought that principle about the action actually affecting the pleasure or leading to the pleasure.
Yep.
That's a really important principle. If you can convince someone to do the right action, then they'll see that it does produce a good pleasure, and it's a way to change their love.
Yep.
It's
Yeah, that's right. You've got to try to do it first. You know, fake it till you make it, as they say.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm open for comments, questions. You can even complain.
I was just going to ask, yeah, I'm very, very interested. I thought that was fascinating. Thanks very much. Your circle of creation, say it goes round and round. Would it not be another way of looking at it as a spiral, either going up or down? You know, so that as you move around, your affections go in one direction or another, and because you're moving in that direction, you hopefully either go in a pathway of regenerating or degenerating.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable to me. I feel like that's something I've heard other pastors talk about, of how it, you know, in terms of our struggles in life and how they kind of spiral over the course of our life. So I wouldn't fight you on that one.
Yeah, because a spiral, not just a circular thing, but it's also got a forward thrust like a spring.
Yep.
They reckon that the solar system actually operates like a spiral. It doesn't just go round the sun, round and round, but we're going somewhere. The whole thing's going like a spiral funnel. You're heading somewhere.
Well, I hope it's good.
Yeah,
Hope it's warmer.
The spiral thing is a very big Swedenborgian thing too. Very big. Yeah.
And I've always found it a really interesting connection between love. If you think of love as an attractive force like magnetism, and a moving magnet can create, can induce an electric field, and a moving electric field can induce magnetism. So if the electric field is like the thoughts, and the magnetism is like the loves, they do create each other in a loop. It's like when you drop a magnet, like a spherical magnet down a copper tube. The copper is not a magnetic material, but the moving magnet induces an electric field in the copper tube as it goes down, and the electric field creates a magnetic field inside the copper tube. So what happens is that little spherical magnet just travels slowly down through the tube and drops out the bottom. So so the magnetism creates electricity, which creates magnetism, which creates electricity, and it's just this loop, which always reminds me of love creating thoughts which can influence the love, create more thoughts. And I've always found that fascinating.
Like pebbles creating ripples in the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Todd, I'm trying to sort of figure out, maybe stupidly so, but what do we really have the power to do and what don't we have the power to do. So obviously we've got the power to act. It seems to be coming from ourselves, even though we're told that ultimately everything that we can do is given to us as a function by God. We obviously have the freedom to feel. What does that mean? That ultimately we're told that God is the only source of love. So if a feeling is a manifestation of love, then we're really redirecting God's love, aren't we? Or directing God's love. And so what does he do? He's giving us the power to be free to turn the love that he gives us behind the scenes, incognito, sort of almost secretly, I would say, to turn it in any direction we choose. We wish, we sort of, I don't know, what's that? It's choosing, isn't it? Yeah, it's choosing.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
so
we're ultimately just
turn
decision
love
makers.
away from God as well, which is not something that God can do.
Correct.
He can only do it, only happens through us, because God never turns his own love against good, truth, and yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. There isn't a whole lot we actually do, but we do have choices.
So all the influences, like we're told that we can't really even think and feel if God stopped stopped his involvement in us doing that, right?
Yeah. Well, it talks about like how even if the angels that are with us left us for a moment, we just faint and be done.
Okay, so that statement of God is the source of everything that happens in our lives is actually a statement that includes mediation. So there is a mediated chain of involvement that maybe steps things down to our level so we can grasp it, understand it, love it, think it, whatever.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. But then still there's something supreme about our individuality that allows us to do something that isn't from those influences. I don't know. I'm trying to put my finger on what it is that allows us to not go with influences. Because, like say once we've become aware that our mind is becoming psychotic, for example, and we go with a whole lot of suggestive thoughts that come into our heads, or really suggestive feelings that generate thoughts in our heads that aren't good for us. We actually seem to have the power to say no.
Todd, could you pop the your 4-stage? I think it's your last slide. Can you pop that back up?
Sure. There you go.
So here's my thinking about this, and it relates kind of to what Joe's saying, I think. And I think I look at something like this from a point of view of a piano teacher, okay? Because I spent 15 years of my working life trying to convince children to do something they didn't want to do, okay? So what you've done there, Todd, with 1A and 1B, you split pleasure and delight away from love and affection. And I think it's a really useful distinction to make, because what we can do, that circle, as you've got it there, there's an inevitability about it. Okay, so if you start at 1A, pleasure or delight, leading to love and affection, leading to thought, leading to action, leading back to pleasure and delight, it's inevitable that we will follow that cycle.
Right.
Okay. So Joe's question is, how do we break that? By starting not at 1A, but at 1B. And what I mean by that is we take an affection that we have or a love that we have, and we actually say, actually, there's something I've got that's more important than the pleasure and delight I'm feeling right now. And
Yep.
I replace it with, and we do it cognitively, we think about it. So, well, actually, I want this instead of what I've got right now. So I think about piano, kids who, you know, they want to learn to be a great piano player. So they replace the frustration that they feel at the moment, I can't do this, you know, and with the determination, no, I actually want to be a great piano player. You do the same thing with diet. Okay, so we replace the love of ice cream with the fact that actually I want a body that looks different from the body that I have. And so I move away from that pleasure of delight because I have a greater love or affection for something else. And this is where this is where temptation comes in, I think, that we have a tussle between different loves, one that will pull us in one direction and one that will pull us in the other direction. We have to decide which direction we're actually going to go in, even though we feel a pleasure or a delight that pulls us very definitely in one way. So, and I think for me, this is where, you know, Swedenborg talks about the split between the will and the understanding.
Yep.
So from our understanding, we can actually look at this process and say, well, hang on, I actually want this one. Not that I feel the affection for it right now, but I can see the greater purpose that is behind going in this direction as opposed to the way my pleasures and delights are pulling me. And that's kind of, I understand that. And that's why I find that split there, between one A and one B, so useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, that's great. So that makes me think that everybody ought to find and follow something that makes more sense. So why isn't everybody heavenly? Is it only those who are so weak that their pleasures and delights have gotten so overwhelming that they do not see how they're going to escape from it? Or are they overwhelmed by influences from hellish sources? But, you know, still they can break free, I guess, can't they?
It's interesting, Joe, because like we all, you know, we can all do this. Like even if we have a worldly love, say you love money, right? You can apply that in the terms of the love of money. So, you know, you get into the business of saving money for a bigger goal. So, and if you can get it at that level, at that worldly level, then you can get it at an internal level as well. But you know, somehow we get distracted by the stuff of the world, and you know, things here seem so much more tangible than things in the spirit. You know, but if we can apply it on an external level, we can also apply it on an internal level too. Got to change the focus.
I guess.
Oh. Joe froze.
And so
Froze for a minute. Can you say it again?
I think God leaves us much more free in internal matters than in external matters, because things that are tangible bring more immediate pleasure, and to pursue something that's not, I believe that nature is not designed to bully us to become spiritually focused.
Yeah.
It does have a huge message in terms of its correspondences, its uses, and everything comes to life spiritually once we are on the spiritual journey, but not until then. Before that, it says nothing about how we ought to be spiritual. You know, whether we should pursue something spiritual, there's nothing obvious, which is why, you know, you get reductionism and external atheism and all that kind of stuff comes out of that. And so that's good. Thank you for exploring that and allowing me to think about that for a while.
Any more questions for Todd?
I just wanted to make a comment that that diagram with the 1A, that could also be the rock bottom stage, which sort of breaks that that cycle for someone so that they no longer feel the love for doing that action. Yeah. So that's one way to change their love.
Yep.
Do you think there's any way out for us?
Every evil has
As the world stands now, the direction it's going, do you reckon it's going to end somehow, some way? It's just survive, put it that way.
So, Leo, aren't we taught that every evil has within it the seed of its own destruction? God has to do very little for it to destroy the pleasure and delights of it in the end. Because like David's example of learning the piano, I was taught by a very good teacher who said, you know, if you want happiness, you can get it right now. You can go to the local drugstore and get some chemistry and it'll fix you up, you know. But you will pay for that. You know, you're actually really borrowing happiness from the future, which turns tomorrow's happiness, it takes away tomorrow's happiness and turns it into misery because you got to pay for it. You got to come off the drugs. You got to.
Oh, I like this.
Whereas learning the piano, the displeasure is now, whereas it grows on you, the pleasure gradually grows on you because of the discipline and the freedom that you start getting by disciplining yourself in that skill. So, yeah, you're kind of paying for it up front rather than the chemical form of happiness, which you're
Paying it forward.
doing.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, pay it forward.
Well, I'll draw a line under tonight. Thanks very much, Todd, for everything you've shared with us. Thanks everybody for participating in your questions. I'll just let you know about next month. So we meet again on the 26th of August, again at 7:30. And we're actually welcoming a Jungian analyst by the name of Annette Lowe on that occasion. So will be interesting to hear what she has to say to us. I actually have no idea what she's talking about, but she'll be telling us about Jungian psychology in some way.
Yeah.
So that'll be a month's time.